All right, the Minneapolis Zoning Board of Adjustment on March 4th, 2021 may now begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the live broadcast of our virtual meeting today, March 4th, 2021. This meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota statute, section 13D.021, due to the declared local health pandemic. For the record, my name is Matt Perry, and I am chair of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I'll now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of quorum.
Board Member Finlayson.
Aye.
Board Member Hutchins.
Aye.
Board Member Johannesson.
Aye.
Board Member Ogiba. Chair Perry.
Here.
Board Member Sandberg.
Here.
Vice Chair Softly.
Here.
Board Member Smikarova.
Here.
Member Wang.
Here.
That's 8 members present.
And we have quorum. Thank you. With that, we'll proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, available at lims.minneapolis.mn.gov. Is there a motion to approve this agenda?
So moved, Finlayson.
Second, Sandberg.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Finlayson.
Aye.
Board Member Hutchins.
Aye.
Board Member Johannesson.
Aye.
Chair Perry.
Aye.
Board Member Sandberg.
Aye.
Vice Chair Softly.
Aye.
Board Member Smikarova.
Aye.
Board Member Wang.
Aye.
8 yeas and 0 nays.
And with that, the motion passes and the agenda is approved. I believe all the board members have seen a copy of the minutes from the February 18th, 2021 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Finlayson.
Second, Sandberg.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Finlayson.
Aye.
Board Member Hutchins.
Aye.
Board Member Johannesson.
Aye.
Chair Perry.
Aye.
Board Member Sandberg.
Aye.
Vice Chair Softly.
Aye.
Board Member Smikarova.
Aye.
Member Wang.
Aye.
It's 8 yeas and 0 nays.
And with that, the motion passes. The minutes from the Zoning Board of Adjustments February 18th, 2021 meeting are approved. Mr. Ellis, are there any petitions or communications?
Chair Perry, members of the board, there are no petitions or communications this evening. Thank you.
Okay, let's review the agenda. I'll read the agenda number and the address of the project and state whether it's slated for consent, continuance, withdrawal, return, or discussion. And I'll just take a moment to talk about what consent items are and what discussion items are. Consent items are those that will be passed without discussion by the board. We'll be adhering to the staff recommendation found on your agenda under the item's recommended motion section. Importantly, any applicable conditions will be listed in the same section. If you agree with this recommendation, including any applicable conditions, you need to do nothing and the board will pass it as recommended. Please check in with the staff member assigned to that item if you have any questions following the decision. If you disagree with the recommendation, please indicate you'd like to speak against the item when I ask, and we'll put it on the discussion agenda. What are discussion items? These are items for which the board will take public testimony, deliberate on, and make a decision. After the public testimony has been heard for each particular discussion item, I will close the public hearing for that agenda item. Once I close the public hearing for an item, no additional public testimony will be taken, but staff may be asked to address board questions. After the public hearing for an item is closed, board members will then discuss and act on motions, and the chair does not vote except in the case of a tie. So with that, we'll look at the disposition of the three land requests we have before us today. And agenda item number 5 is 605 12th Avenue Southeast. This is a discussion item. Agenda item number 6 is 2833 East Lake of the Isles Parkway. This is also a discussion item. And agenda item number 7 is 1015 26th Street East. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Is there anybody who would like to speak against this item? I hear no one and see no one. Mr. Hutchins, you have a question on number 7?
Thank you, Chair Perry. I just was curious if I can get clarification on staff's position about how this park is different from any other park in Minneapolis that would need it, that would allow it to have a variance from the 4 to 8 feet. Their practical difficulty states that it's a city or a block-sized park with 3 right-of-ways or a 3-sided right-of-way. I just don't see how that's any different than any other park, I guess. Just looking for some clarification, I guess.
Council Member Hutchins. It isn't really any different than any other park. It's more the practical difficulty really comes from the unique uses of park open space, in that recreational equipment often flies out of the park and into the street, so it creates a safety hazard in the street. So it's really more about the unique uses of park space.
All right, well, thank you.
Does that help, Mr. Hutchins?
I just don't see how that's any different than any other park with kids playing and people playing sports, but.
Well, we certainly can pull the item, have it discussed briefly, and you can be on record as voting against that if you so choose.
Yeah, would you please pull it? Thank you, Chair Perry.
Okay. We will pull that item. And so that will be a discussion item as well. We have no items on consent, so we're going to move on and we'll go to our first discussion item. This is 605 12th Avenue Southeast. I'm sorry. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
Yes, Mr. Liska.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, board members. If IT could pull up the presentation for this. IT, do you have the presentation for this item 5?
They did say they had material for all 3 items.
Andrew, I apologize to CJ. What item is this? Item number?
5.
Thank you. I'll grab it right now.
So as you mentioned, Chair, this variance request is located at 605 12th Avenue Southeast. The proposal is for a new home. There are 3 specific yard variances being requested. The front yard, north interior side, and south interior side. The existing site is a single family dwelling. It is a 2-story per code, and this parcel is very small, approximately 28 feet in width and 96 feet deep, totaling just under 2,800 square feet. And no alley serves this site. Next slide, please. Can you go back one? Oh, maybe that's right. Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry. The existing structure on site is 24.5 by 27 feet. An enclosed front porch exists on the front of the home, and that front porch to the lot line is 5 feet. The north building wall is 1.1 feet from the lot line, and the south building wall is 2.6 feet from the lot line. The structure on site is considered a 2-story home, as the second floor does not intersect with the floor joists of the first, or the roof, or the floor joists of the second floor within 2 feet. So code does consider this a 2-story dwelling, although it very much functions like a 1.5 stories. Next slide, please. The front facade there, you see that space between the roof of the enclosed porch there and the main roof line. Code would call this a 1.5 story if that space there was 2 feet or less, and that's approximately 4 feet. So again, why that matters in this instance is mainly how we calculate our demolition calculations. Next slide, please. The proposed structure is a new home, as the demolition exceeds 60%. The applicant is seeking to utilize much of the foundation, first floor, and second floor. In running those calculations, as far as the demolition is concerned, we're looking at changes to the structure. With that second story getting increased in height, we are considering that to be a 100% demolition from zoning. The removal of that enclosed porch on the front counts towards that. The applicant is also proposing a rear addition, so there's additional space. So currently this is around an 80% demolition. Had this been a 1.5 stories, it would be closer to a 60% demolition, probably just under. So again, they're proposing a rear addition. That rear addition does comply with all of the interior side yard setbacks. They're proposing to remove the existing enclosed front porch and also increase the height of that second story, basically eliminating those knee walls and making a more functional 2-story. So again, code requires variances to the front, north interior, and south interior side yard setbacks, as this is a new home. Next slide, please. Here we have the site plan. Basically, the existing structure on the right side of the screen there, almost that box. We see that showing 11 feet to that front lot line. Again, the north side at 1.1, the south side, I believe 2.6. So again, those are the 3 variances requested by the applicant. Next slide, please.
Mr. Liska, could you go back to the previous slide?
Yep.
So can you, I'm sorry, you did walk through this, but could you just go through in a little bit more detail on where it's the north and south that staff is not finding for?
Sure.
Just where those are located, is that for the new, the proposed addition, or for the raising it to a full second story?
Yep, it would be for raising the second story. That portion of the structure where it says the 605 12th Avenue Southeast, that's the portion of the structure that exists both the first floor and second floor at that 1.1 feet. Code doesn't let you go up as a grandfathered right, even if this was, less than 60%. So regardless, at the 1.1 feet to do anything, you would need a variance request. So that front portion of the building, since they are increasing that wall height on that second floor, we have that 4 feet existing. They're proposing another 4 feet to go for a full second story. So that requires the variance on the north side there. The south side also existing, increasing in height, staying at 2.6 feet, but going up. The portion on the rear, the 22 by 26, or 22 by 18 and a half, they're showing an eave there that almost looks like it's in the required yard. The structure itself is complying with all zoning standards. So, and the front, again, at 11 feet, this is zoned R2B. R2B has a standard setback of 20 feet, or the established line connecting. We can get into some more of that during those variance findings. Did you have additional questions about this? Can I?
No, so that helps out as you get into the findings. I just wanted to make sure I was following where you were talking about as you went through the findings.
Sure. Thank you. Next slide, please, IT. So when issuing a variance, 3 findings must be met. The first finding relates to practical difficulties and circumstances unique to the property. Both the front yard setback and interior side yard setbacks, both of those variance requests are tied to the size of this parcel. It's very small at 2,800 square feet and very narrow at 28 feet in width. Any development on this parcel would have a practical difficulty associated with the small size of this. Zoning code would allow a structure at 18 feet in width. You would be able to build a new 18-foot wide structure here and comply with your 5-foot interior side yard setbacks. With that, the small size of the site still makes development challenging here. Next slide, please. The second variance finding is regarding the use of the property, if it's being used in a reasonable manner, and also keeping with the spirit and intent of the code. The proposed front yard setback aligns with those adjacent parcels along 12th Avenue Southeast. This is reasonable and complies with the intent and spirit of the ordinance. The spirit of the ordinance there is to create a uniform block face along 12th Avenue. That established line being that this structure aligns with those, we are able to make that variance finding. Regarding the north yard, while the 1.1 foot setback is existing, the existing adjacent structure is 6.6 feet away. The intent of interior side yard setbacks is to provide a separation between uses and structures. And this intent of the ordinance is not met with a setback that close between uses. Regarding the south yard, again, the 2.6 feet is existing, and the existing adjacent structure is 5.6 feet away from this structure proposed. The adjacent structure is an attached garage and not habitable space. that does lessen the impact of such a tight proposed setback, but is still not meeting the spirit and intent of the code in providing that separation between uses and structures. Next slide, please. Last, the proposed variance will not alter the essential character of the area. The proposed setbacks are largely the setbacks that are on site. Many of the homes along this block have fairly tight setbacks, are built that in ways that we wouldn't, allow today as of right. But it has been, these setbacks are existing. Obviously, they're being expanded upon, but that would blend with that existing character of the area. Next slide, please. And with that, staff recommends approval of that front yard variance down to 11 feet and denial of the north interior setback and south interior setback. I'll be here for questions, and the applicant is also present.
Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Liska, and thanks for addressing the questions I had. I think I might have a few others if no one else chimes in, but I see that Mr. Johannesson would like to ask a question. Please proceed, Mr. Johannesson.
Thank you, Chair Perry, and thanks for your presentation, Mr. Liska. In the setbacks and the ordinances are trying to keep structures apart. Is that also the intent to keep them, I'll guess, more safe in a fire condition or something like that? Is there enough room between these buildings now that the fire department can get in there? 5-6 feet seems tight to me, and I'm just curious about that.
The applicant is working with CCS Plan Review. Plan Review has additional standards that come into play when structures are close to the lot line. That was one of the issues I identified up front, made sure that the applicant was aware of that. They have been working with CCS. So yes, that is less of an issue, as CCS can find ways regarding the building permit itself to approve at this distance.
And Mr. Liska, can you let people know what CCS means?
Construction Code Services. Our folks in CCS Plan Review enforce the building code. So,
thank you.
Is it all right if I speak to that as well?
I'm sorry. Who's speaking?
This is Mike Sweetall, the applicant.
We'll give you an opportunity to speak when we're done having staff answer questions, and that we open the public hearing and give you an opportunity to provide testimony, sir.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions of Mr. Liska on his presentation? Mr. Hutchins.
Thank you, Chair Perry. Thank you, Mr. Liska. Am I correct in assuming that they would need all 3 variances to build that addition going up, Mr. Liska?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So if we approve the one that that staff had found findings for, it still wouldn't do them any good without the other 2.
Correct.
All right, thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions of Mr. Liska? I have a question. So what is the, what can the applicant do by right? They can put on their addition. It is considered new construction because of the demolition. But they can't go up without a variance. So but does that mean that they could maintain? They couldn't do any demolition above on the 2nd story? Is that what we're really getting down to?
I mean, yeah, ultimately, if the board would deny those interior side yard setback requests, the applicant would still be able to build in addition to the rear. The structure that exists on site today would largely remain the same. You could demo the existing front porch, that would be fine. you could do your rear addition. You're going to be less than 60% there, and that building would be considered, or zoning would view that as a remodel and not a new structure. So those existing setbacks that are there wouldn't come into play. We would be looking at the new proposal, which would be that rear addition that is complying with all yard setbacks.
Thank you. All right, are there any other questions of Mr. Liska? I see none. Let's open the public hearing. And the applicant, sir, I didn't catch your name. I'm sorry.
Mike Sweetall.
Sweetall. Mr. Sweetall, if you would like to give testimony and if you want to answer the question that came up too, you could do that at this time.
Sounds good. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thanks, Andrew, for presenting that. Basically, yeah, we've been working with the Construction Code Services and Andrew to kind of dial this project in. Basically, we're fireproofing both sides of the house with exterior sheetrock and interior sheetrock so that the wall will be literally an hour or more rated due to the closeness of the property line. The garage to the south is a one-story garage, and it won't affect anything as far as the second story going up another 4 feet. And, you know, in general, we're just trying to keep the existing structure. We're not trying to, we want to use the existing foundation in order to go up. The existing structure is outdated. The stairs are not compliant. The floor systems are not compliant. The ceilings are not compliant. So in order to redo it, we just kind of wanted to strip it down to the bones and start over and get it to where it should be up to code.
Okay, so one of the things, Mr. Sweetall, that we have to do, and you've probably been told this by staff, is in order to get a variance, we have to, there are 3 legal findings that we have to find for. One is practical difficulty. One is whether it's reasonable or not. And the other is whether it is injurious and whether it's in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. So one of these findings, whether it's being done in a, you're using the property in a reasonable way with this variance has not been found for because it's not meeting the spirit and intent of the ordinance. Can you speak to that? I know that's a little bit technical, but
no, I get it. So,
okay.
I mean, the overall intent is to remodel the house, get it up to code. It's dilapidated. It's small. It's had many Band-Aids over the year, and we're just trying to get it back together. But in order to do that, you know, you end up kind of chasing your tail. So if you're going to do it right, and that's kind of our intent, is to build it. Make that second story, which has kind of been band-aided and added onto and whatnot. We just kind of wanted to strip it down and basically make a full 2-story. And then also be compliant on the north and south side by fire rating it. The circumstances are it's a tiny lot. I mean, the lot is literally 28.7 feet wide, and a typical lot is 40 feet wide. So we're dealing with a rather small lot in an existing house, and the house is at where it's at, and we want to use the existing foundation. We want to use the existing structure and not have to demo it and try to recycle that material. We'd rather keep it, reuse it, and add on to it and make it more functionally obsolescent for the people that were to occupy it after we were done. And as far as the intent, it's R2B interior 3, which is 1 to 3 stories. Typical housing in the neighborhood is all 3.5 story. So this would fit in with the neighborhood as far as the size of the houses to the north and south of it and across the street from it.
Yeah, so I think if I'm correct in remembering the presentation properly, that the staff has found for the first and third finding, what they haven't found is that the request is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance of keeping distance between properties, which you would have by right to be able to do if you didn't go up and you just did the addition to the rear. You could take off the front porch. So that's the issue. Not whether it's fitting in with the surrounding properties.
All right.
Okay, does anybody have any questions of Mr. Sweetall? Anyone else? Can I get your address, Mr. Sweetall? I should have asked for that in the beginning.
The home address?
Whatever your address is. Is it where you're currently living? Is the property where you're currently living?
No.
Okay,
Nope.
could I get your home address?
2115 St. John's Court. It's Woodbury 55129.
Thank you. We just need that for the public record. All right. Thanks for your testimony and thanks for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this? I don't think anybody else is in the call queue for this item. And with that, I will close the public hearing. Board comment. Any board comment?
Nope.
Chair Perry, Board Member
Yes.
Finlayson.
Yes, sir.
I need to recuse myself. I've done work for a fee for the applicant.
Okay. So if you could just take care of that with Ms. Blandford, the paperwork afterwards. And Ms. Blandford, if you would note that when you call the roll.
Certainly, Chair Perry.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Mr. Sandberg?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Perry. I agree with staff findings for items 1 and 3, for findings 1 and 3. I think we could discuss some more about the reasonableness of this project, in that if the project is not done, it's the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance is still not met. So I think having a project that is improving the neighborhood by reducing the setbacks from the front yard by taking off the front porch, by building an addition that conforms to the required setbacks, I think the applicant is showing a reasonable project. I'd like to hear from other board members, but I think we should discuss certainly that finding.
Sure. And I think, just to be clear, I think the issue is that staff was not able to find for number 2, which is that it's meeting the spirit intent of the ordinance. And if they didn't do if they didn't go up, they wouldn't require a variance. So you're correct that there would be that it would be non-conforming, but they could continue to have those non-conforming rights because they were it wasn't a complete demolition. Is that right, Mr. Liska? Do I have that right?
That's correct. We'd review it like a remodel rather than a new home. The remodel would be fine, acknowledging the existing setbacks of the existing structure and looking at the rear building addition as to how that complies with code.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page with what the issue is that we're dealing with. And I appreciate Mr. Sandberg's bringing up that point. Anybody else? Would they like to weigh in? Mr. Johannesson?
Thanks, Chair Perry. I guess I'm kind of leaning towards staff findings, and I'm questioning if they're demoing this much, why aren't they just demoing all of it and making a new building? And so that's where I'm standing now. I'm leaning towards supporting staff.
Thanks for those comments. Mr. Hutchins.
Thank you, Chair Perry. So if we're looking for variance or for findings 2 with the spirit and intent of the ordinance is meant to keep separation between the buildings for fire protectiveness, but because of the current build right now, the houses adjacent on both sides are as close as they're ever going to be, even if this goes up or not. So because they're going to change the exterior, are we not meeting the intent and the spirit of fire protection from domicile to domicile by allowing the variance? We're actually getting closer to what the spirit of it is. Just food for thought.
Yes, and so I think that Mr. Sandberg is making a similar point, and the issue is whether, I'm not trying to speak for or against, but I think the issue is that his staff has stated that this is a demo, and so they're basically starting from scratch because of what they're doing. And so we have to find that is it within the spirit and intent of the ordinance, as if it were a new building. So if they don't go up, then we don't have to. It becomes a non-question. It's a non-issue, and it's not only the fire code, but it's light and air and other things. It's the space between the buildings.
Okay.
Mr. Softly.
Thank you, Chair Perry. Thank you for the presentation, everybody, and the comments. I think for me, the turning point is that it's got living space on a third level, and whether it technically qualifies to the third level is sort of irrelevant to me at this point because it is so close to the property line. I think I could support the applicant if this were going to be strictly two-level living. But with that third level, I think it's far too tight. I think the air and space is a real issue. I understand that the neighborhood itself is really unique in this regard, that there are a lot of homes that are really close together. You just have to take a look at the flat map and see how long and narrow everything is. But I think that this is too tall given the lateral constraints on the parcel.
Thanks for those comments, Mr. Softly. Anyone else? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion from somebody. Mr. Sandberg.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Perry. I just wanted to raise a question about what Mr. Softly said. As I understood the plans, there are 3 levels of living space, but one is in the basement. Maybe I'm incorrect about that, but I thought it was just raising the second floor to make it more habitable. Maybe staff can answer that for me.
Mr. Liska, can you weigh in on that, please?
Yep. So again, the structure is already a 2-story per code. If the second floor joist would be within 2 feet of the first floor, this would be a 1.5 stories. That 4-foot band that exists on the house today makes it a 2-story. They're looking to increase that band to create full living on that 2nd story. So I guess it complies with height and everything. It's that additional 4 feet of wall on the existing 2nd story that creates the need for all of these variances. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So it's really a two-story house with living in the basement as well.
Yes.
Thanks for that comment. Mr. Johannesson, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just to clarify, looking at the floor plans, the attic space is shown as a living area. Board Member Sandberg. So there's 2 full stories as you look at the plans, and then the attic or the roof is shown as having bedrooms and the like in it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Hutchins.
Thank you, Chair Perry. If you, just so we're clear, the houses to the north and south are both the same height or the same style with that 3rd story attic space as the proposed. So it would not exceed or look bulky or be injurious to the area that it's occupying compared to the houses next to it, just so we're clear.
Yes, and I think, thanks for that comment. I think staff is saying that it does fit in with the surrounding area. The resulting proposed plan would fit in with the surrounding area. So I think that's why they have found for the applicant for finding number 3. But I appreciate that comment and pointing that out. Anyone else? So as I said, I would entertain a motion at this point. Would someone like to make a motion? Mr. Johannesson?
Thanks, Chair Perry. I would like to make a motion to approve staff findings.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second that.
Okay, it's seconded, and so we have a motion and a second. And is there any further discussion? We've had quite a bit of discussion, so I assume not, but I'll give an opportunity. Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll on the motion, which is to deny? I should make clear what the motion is: to approve the front yard setback and deny the 2 side yard setbacks, the north and side yard setbacks. That's what the motion is, because it's staff. That's what staff finding is. So with that, will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Finlayson has recused himself. Board Member Hutchins.
Nay.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Sandberg.
No.
Softly.
Aye.
Mikarova.
Aye.
Wang.
Aye.
That's 4 yeas, 2 nays, and 1 recusal.
Okay, so that motion passes. So the application for the front yard setback is approved, but the south and north side setbacks are denied, and the applicant can follow up with Mr. Liska to see what their options are going forward. Let's move on to the second item. I'm sorry, agenda item number 6, which is 2833 East Lake of the Isles Parkway.
Good evening, Chair Perry and members of the board. IT, thank you for putting up the presentation. So Plan 12192 is an application for a proposed variance located at 2833 East Lake of the Isles Parkway. Next slide, please. The subject site is a 4,420 square foot residential lot. The subject site is located in the R1 multiple family zoning district and in the interior 3 built form overlay and the shoreland overlay district. The lot is an irregular shape with 5 sides and is a through lot with the rear property line facing James Avenue South. The existing structure is a duplex and has a non-conforming front yard setback of 14.5 feet. The existing front porch is considered a non-conforming front yard obstruction and is located 8.33 feet from the front property line. Next slide, please. The proposed plan is to rebuild and enlarge the open front porch. The existing front porch is 52 square feet and the proposed front porch would be 105 square feet, expanding to the south on the lot and toward the front property line. As I noted, the existing front porch is 8.33 feet from the front property line and the new porch would be 6.5 feet from that property line. The variance request is to reduce the front yard setback from the district minimum of 20 feet to that 6.5 feet that would be to the new porch. Next slide, please. Staff found that practical difficulties unique to the property do not exist in relation to the proposed expansion of the front porch. Although the lot is somewhat smaller than a standard R1 lot, there is nothing about the parcel in particular that requires the expansion of the front porch. As the porch is an existing non-conforming structure, the applicant would be permitted by right to rebuild the porch in the same location, but they're not permitted to increase the nonconformity. Staff found that the proposal would be consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance and that the request is reasonable. The enlarged porch would not have any measurable impact on the light, air, or open space around the subject site, and the new porch would provide additional covered outdoor area, allowing more space for protected uses on a slightly smaller lot. Finally, staff found that the proposed variance would not alter the essential character of the locality or impact the use or enjoyment of the property within the vicinity. The enlarged porch would actually be in line with the porches of the homes directly to the north and south of the subject site. Allowing the variance would not have any greater impact on the street or sidewalk than do the porches of the adjacent homes and would not impact the users of East Lake of the Isles Parkway. Next slide, please. In conclusion, although staff found the second and third variance findings to be met, because staff did not find a practical difficulty, we are recommending denial of the variance request. This concludes my presentation and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Are there any questions of staff? I see none. So let's open the public hearing. We have a couple of people on the line for speaking on this application. The applicants are first, and I'll let them go first. Ellen and Jim Van Ewarden. If I've got the pronunciation wrong, please correct me, and if you could give your address for the record.
Yeah. Okay, the pronunciation is Van Ewarden.
Van Ewarden. Thank you.
Nothing to it.
If you could please proceed with your testimony. And you pretty much heard that and know from talking to staff that it's the practical difficulty finding that they can't find for?
Yes. And I will, this is Jim Van Ewarden. I have with me my wife, Ellen, and the building in question at 2833 Lake of the Isles Parkway is our home.
Yep.
And, we'd like to thank the zoning board for the opportunity to speak.
And special thanks to City Planner Leah Dawkins for her advice on the application process. We love our 1922 duplex in our neighborhood, and we want to make the house as beautiful, functional, and true to its surroundings as it can be. Unfortunately, though, the existing porch isn't functional for our family. And the family includes Ellen and me in the upstairs unit, and Ellen's 84 and 85-year-old parents in the first floor unit. Ellen's parents moved into our building after her father was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which substantially limits his mobility. But as you probably noticed, the header on the variance report describes our request as going from a 20-foot setback down to 6.5 feet. And that's probably the required format, but to lay people like us, it sounds like we're proposing to add on 14 feet closer to the property line. In fact, a proposed porch would be about 1 foot and 10 inches closer to the line than the existing porch. The existing porch is about 2 feet further from the property line than the neighbor's porches to the north and south. The proposed porch is a couple inches further from the line than the neighbor's porches. All three, the neighbor's existing and our proposed porches, would be about 10 feet from the public sidewalk. As part of the project, we'll be removing a brick planter that's several feet closer to the sidewalk and property line, and the proposed porch will be. So the built structures will be further back than they are now. Right now, our existing porch and front entry are difficult to use and would be even if they weren't deteriorating. We have no usable front yard because of the slope down to the sidewalk. The porch is all there is. The proposed porch would be much more useful and make it much easier to enter our home. Part of that relates to the existing front door and storm door. Because of this, our porch's small depth, our front door and storm door are installed in opposite directions because it's hard to get around the storm door on the porch. And it's awkward for anyone to get in the building, and even more so for Ellen's parents. The additional depth we requested would allow us to correct this problem. You've seen a few letters in support of the variance and opposing the variance. And the neighbors opposing the variance quote the report header, which might have misled them to think that a 14-foot addition has been proposed. It's actually less than 2 feet, as noted by our next door neighbor supporting the variance. And note that one of the opposing neighbors is next door on the other side, with a porch closer to the sidewalk and property line than the one we're proposing. So thank you for your consideration. And I'd like to request that you approve the variance request. I'm happy to take questions, and if there aren't any, Ellen will offer her thoughts.
Mr. Van Iwarden, I do have a question. I do have a question of you. What is the practical difficulty that you have? You've mentioned some things. We can't really, well, we certainly, the city acknowledges hardship for people who are not able to get around as easily as maybe they once were able to. The variances go with the land, not with people. So when we're talking about practical difficulties, it's really something that is unique about the property, not unique about the people living in it. Can you speak to that?
Not in a legal sense. I think Ellen could speak more accurately to the practical difficulties.
Hi, This is Ellen Van Warden, and I share Jim's thanks to all of you for your work and on this issue. We believe that this is exactly the type of situation that a variance is designed for. And as Ms. Dawkins said in her opening, the other two findings, the findings that a setback requirement is really designed to handle change the amount of light and air, open space, have been met. On the practical difficulty, and we understand that it's with the lot, given where our house was built originally, there is no conforming spot in the front yard for the front porch to enter our house. And as you may have seen from the pictures, our front door is almost a story and a half higher than the sidewalk below. So we have this steep slope and then a shorter, long flight of stairs and a shorter flight of stairs to get up to the spot. And we basically have no other front yard than the front porch, which goes up to the edge of the slope. So the practical difficulty is really the steepness of our front yard, the extremely small size of the front yard, and the very narrow lot. Our house is just 5 feet from the property line on either side. They were these beautiful, beautiful homes were packed into these, to a very small lot. And we feel like we understand the policy that we could, we can rebuild what we already have. That locks in place a poorly designed porch from 1922. And we feel like there's room with the variance designed to handle just that situation, letting a property owner improve their property without impacting the neighbor's enjoyment or our fellow parkway and park users' enjoyment. So we think that we're doing something reasonable and in character with, and we didn't create the situation. And we hope that you will see our practical difficulty and approve this variance.
Thanks for that testimony. Does anybody have any questions of the Van Wardens? I see none. So again, thank you for your testimony. Next on the line is Mr. Hoyland. If you could star 6 to unmute yourself and give your name and address for the record.
Hello. Hello,
Yes,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm David Hoyland. I'm the next door neighbor on the northeast side. My address is 2829 Lake of the Isles Parkway, East Lake of the Isles Parkway. And my porch is a couple feet deeper, goes a couple feet farther toward the sidewalk, which allows us to get 3 or 4 chairs and a small table out there and enjoy our porch. My porch, I believe, is identical to the one on the other side of the Van Wardens. And for some reason that we don't know or understand, the Van Wardens got the short end of the stick when the house was built in 1922. And so their porch is about 6 feet, extends about 6 feet from their house instead of 8 or 9 feet from their house. And so I support enlarging their porch. And I think that the practical difficulty, while the staff has said that requirement has not been met, it says, they state that the porches do not create an established front yard setback, the ones on either side. And I understand that that's probably technically correct, but when I look at the definition of practical difficulty, it talks about unique conditions of a property that cause compliance with the standards, in this case, compliance with the setbacks, to deprive the property owner of substantial rights similar to those enjoyed by property owners in the same zoning district. So in this case, it seems like we're awfully close to a property difficulty, or we have one, in the fact that the neighbors have porches that are usable because of their size. The neighbors on either side, the next door neighbors, but for some reason, the applicant's porch was built smaller, making it really just a way to get in the front door and not a place to enjoy it, something to sit down at or to hardly turn around and coming and going from the house. And for those reasons, I support their variance request, and that's my testimony.
Thank you, sir. I don't think anybody else is in queue, but I'll ask, is there anybody else who would like to speak for or against the application? You can press *6 to unmute yourself and if you would give your name and address for the record. Looks like we don't have anyone else, so let's close the public hearing. Board comment. Mr. Selfley?
Thank you, Chair Perry. Unfortunately, I don't see a practical difficulty, and I agree with staff findings.
Thanks for that comment. Anyone else? Mr. Sandberg?
Thanks, Chair Perry. I think if there is a practical difficulty, it might be the steepness of the front yard and the inability to use any other part of the front yard than that front porch. The fact that these houses are built at the same time with the same architectural characteristics, and that the applicant is proposing to make the house more like the neighbors rather than less like the neighbors, also is a unique characteristic of this lot, in that it was built different from some fairly significant architectural features in the neighborhood. So I would like to hear from other board members, but I think there is an argument for practical difficulties in this case.
Thanks for those comments, Mr. Sandberg. Anyone else who would like to comment? Mr. Johannesson.
Thanks, Chair Perry. I agree with Board Member Sandberg. I think there is practical difficulties. There's nowhere to be out in the front. And this is a way to allow them access to do that. It's very steep to get to the sidewalk. It's actually proposed to be smaller than the two adjacent units, which, some of the argument has been to match those. It's actually a little bit smaller than that. And I feel like there's got to be a way that we can find a way to get this for them.
Okay, thanks for those comments. Anyone else who'd like to weigh in? I think I'd like to ask staff a question, if I may, for myself.
Chair Perry?
Yes. What is the, so when there is a required yard, we're talking sort of about the fact that there is a steepness to the front slope of the yard. These other, let me just be clear. I thought I read something that the fact that there was a steep slope in the front yard was not unique to the property, that other properties face the same issue, not necessarily in right next door, but across the city. But how is staff seeing steep slopes for front yards in terms of practical difficulties?
My interpretation generally is that we look at, in this case particularly, it's a steep slope initially, but then it levels off. And in terms of practical difficulties, we don't generally interpret a slope to get up to a flat lot to be a practical difficulty that is very unique, because generally there's steps built up, and it doesn't really present a problem. In this case, the larger difficulty is just that the location of the existing structure is built really close to the front property line, so it really limits the space in the front yard that they have to work with. And when you combine that with the slope, where they can't build out over the slope, they do sort of lose that square footage in the front yard to work with in terms of livability.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I was just curious because I can think of, I happen to live in an area where on the other side of the street there are many homes where the front yard is all but gone because of the steepness, but then plateaus out, like you said, and leads up to either open air porches or a porch like the applicant's, something of that nature, or a vestibule. So that's why I was asking how how staff generally viewed conditions like this. Okay. Mr. Johannesson, you have a question?
Yeah, I guess maybe a question and a comment then. Since the house is built 14.6 from the property line and the traditional setback is 20, right, 25, is it a practical difficulty that the house was built closer to infringe upon the front setback and not allow them the ability to provide a front porch as such?
The way that we interpreted that is that the existing location of the structure in and of itself isn't necessarily a practical difficulty, and the fact that they're allowed to, that the fact that the applicants are allowed to maintain the existing porch in the same location, we wouldn't prevent them from rebuilding it. And so because the request is to expand the porch, I really had to focus on whether or not they had a practical difficulty that kept them from being able to have a functioning porch, more or less. So I looked at it from that perspective in terms of looking for practical difficulties.
Mr. Johannesson, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions on this matter?
Chair Perry, John Finlayson.
Yes, Mr. Finlayson.
Yeah, the applicant had nothing to do with citing the property, that is to say the improvement on the lot. It's as found by them. And so I'm in favor of granting the variance request as requested. I think that they're not responsible for, like I say, the siting of the house, the siting of the porch, the size of the existing porch. It will give them a usable piece of their front yard, and also will create safety in terms of eyes on the street, because a usable porch is going to have people on it and people are going to be watching. So again, I'm in favor of granting the request. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. At this point, we've had a bit of discussion, so is there a motion to be entertained? Would someone like to make a motion?
Chair Perry, I move that we grant the variance as requested. John Finlayson.
And with the practical difficulties as described by board members speaking in favor of the granting of the application?
That is correct. Thank you.
And I'll second that. This is Sandberg.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Finlayson.
Aye.
Hutchins.
Nay.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Sandberg.
Aye.
Softly.
Nay.
Nikarova.
Aye.
Wang.
Nay.
That's 4 yay, 3 nay.
And so that motion passes, and so for the that means that the application is approved. Your variance requests are approved to the Van Iwardens, and good luck with your project. Thanks for providing testimony today. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Okay, I get notice that Mr. Softly needs to leave the meeting. We are going on to item number 7, which is 1015 26th Street East.
Thank you, Chair Perry. This is Board Member Softly, signing off for the day.
Yep, thank you. Ms. Dawkins.
Chair Perry and board members, on to the next presentation for Plan 12169, which is a variance request to increase the height of a fence in the required front yard from 4 feet to 8 feet for Stewart Park. Next slide.
And what I would do is I would just give the quick highlights, and okay. We know that one of the board members, Mr. Hutchins, has a concern about or questions why there's a practical difficulty, so I'd focus on that.
Okay. Just a little bit of site background. The site is located at 1015 26th Street East. The site is in the R2B multiple family district in the park's built form overlay. It's a 5.13 acre park, and it's bounded on 3 sides by public right-of-way, and the Anderson Community School is just to the south of the park. They share the same super block. Next slide, please. The proposal would add a new fence along the north side of Stewart Park adjacent to the 26th Street East. The fence is proposed to be 8 feet tall and within the technical front yard setback off of 26th Street East, which triggered the variance to allow the increase in fence height from 4 feet to 8 feet. Next slide, please. The staff, as far as staff findings, and I'll just focus on the practical difficulty here, the staff found that the configuration of the park in relation to the adjacent rights-of-way and the unique uses of parkland constitute practical difficulties in meeting the ordinance. The subject property is a full block of open space flanked on the north, east, and west sides by public right-of-way. The use of the property as a park in and of itself creates unique fencing requirements in order to maintain safety within and adjacent to the park. Because the property is a small open space with streets on 3 sides, the standard uses of a park, such as ball games and field sports, creates hazards for traffic in the streets. And if there was a fence meeting the 4-foot height requirement, it's more likely that balls and other equipment would fly over the fence into the street, creating risks for both vehicles and pedestrians adjacent to the park. The proposed fence would be 8 feet tall for the length of the fence, with breaks in the fence to accommodate walking paths through the park. The circumstances of the park were not created by the Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Board, as Stewart Park and the adjacent street grid was established in the early 20th century. I would just add that staff has typically recommended approval of park fence variances because of the unique circumstances parks represent in residential districts. Parks just require fencing that's taller and more intense than the fencing that's needed on residential lots. So the very fact that it is a park creates a unique practical difficulty. And I can go into the other findings, but if you don't want me to, I don't have to.
No, that's fine. So the recommendation is to deny because
excuse me, the staff recommendation was to recommend approval of the requested variance to increase the height of the fence from 4 feet to 8 feet. And
okay.
that concludes my presentation.
Okay. So we have Mr. Hutchins, you've raised some questions about the practical difficulty, whether that really is a practical difficulty or not. I would ask the same question. So does that mean that there are going to be fences put up at all of our parks, Ms. Dawkins?
Possibly. We have recently approved variances to increased fence heights at Cedar Park. The board just approved a variance for that. Parks, I believe that, and I think the applicant can speak more to this, but I believe Parks is in a capital improvement phase where they're proposing a lot of improvements to a lot of parks, and fencing is involved in many of those projects just to increase public safety.
Okay. Any other questions of Ms. Dawkins? Yes, Mr. Hutchins.
Thanks, Chair Perry. So my question is still the same. Why, if it's going to be on every park like this, which I don't argue the validity of needing a fence, that I totally understand that. It just, if it's going to be on every fence, why is it going to be a variance every time instead of just going to the code and fixing it?
That is a totally fair question. One that I cannot totally answer because I am not in the code writing section of CPED. So, but that's a totally legit. It will continue to be an issue if the code isn't fixed, and this will continue to be a request from parks to increase the height of fences. And it looks like Mr. Ellis has an answer.
Please proceed, Mr. Ellis.
Chair Perry, Board Member Finlayson, members of the board. One of the issues we have with parks is that they are all traditionally have been zoned residential, so they all do technically have residential setbacks. However, of course, those residential setbacks are primarily intended for residential development. So in many circumstances, we have an issue here where the parks, they're unique uses in a sense for residentially zoned lots, but are residentially zoned parcels. So there, so I think Ms. Dawkins has gotten into quite a bit of that and what we're doing. Generally, this is sort of one of the reasons why variances exist. When you have uses that are different, or there's something unique about the lot or the use of the lot, or it might be this is sort of the mechanism to get to there. While we could build an exception, we could see ourselves building in exceptions for other uses. Generally, we try to keep the code as simple as possible. In a sense, I guess maybe the way to think about it is the reason that a fence the issues with the fences here are because they're in required yards. I mean, in a sense, we don't eliminate the required yards for parks, even though they're not residential. They're not going to, generally when they're a block like this, they're not going to impact an adjoining residential use, which is the point of the residential yard, to create to have open space in the front, light and air, all those sorts of things. Well, parks by definition are that. So it's sort of part and parcel to the fact that we have required yards for something that really doesn't need a required yard, but we can't eliminate the required yard without amending the zoning code quite a bit. We have bandied about, as part of the 2040 plan, maybe creating a parks and open space zoning district. So we'll see as we get into more zoning districts whether that could impact that when we come down to it a couple of years from now, because as Ms. Dawkins noted, it is parks and open space, and so we'll have production mixed use, we have a lot of things. So all we've done so far is the built form overlay. As we come forward and try to tackle the use aspect of things, this could be something we could take a look at. So, but for the meantime, we have been recommending approval due to the findings that are shown by Ms. Dawkins. We do have other examples where some parks have received variances to their fence height for the similar reasons, as well as recently there was, I can't remember the park exactly, but there was a modified to allow a skating area, like a skate park as part of the park. That was in a required yard as well. In many respects, it's similar findings to the fence variance in this case. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Did that help, Mr. Hutchins?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Chair Perry. I just think this gets on the verge of policy making if we're just going to see park after park after park come up and then we're going to just say yes every time. Well, then at a certain point, why are we even granting a variance if it's not really a variance from the norm? But I'll go with it. Thank you.
Okay, so since I didn't see any other questions of Ms. Dawkins, I will open the public hearing. And we have one person who is in the queue to speak, and it is Ms. Roe Essler. Do you want to give testimony? And if you could press *6 to unmute yourself and give your address as well.
Chair Perry, members of the board, I do not wish to speak. I only signed up in case there were questions. I'm the Minneapolis Park Board representative.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Without anybody else in the queue, let's close the public hearing. Board comment.
Chair Perry, John Finlayson.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have no problem granting this particular variance, nor do I have problems granting parks other variances for other fences as required. But it's good to remember, things don't just go one way. They can go both ways. So because of the zoning, this opens the argument for a homeowner to make for a residential property that truly is residential for a fence. So there it sits.
Thanks for those comments. Mr. Sandberg, did you want to make a motion?
Yes, thanks, Chair Perry. I'll move staff findings.
Is there a second?
Second, Johannesson.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Finlayson.
Aye.
Hutchins.
Aye.
Johannesson.
Aye.
Sandberg.
Aye.
Karova.
Aye.
Wang.
Aye.
That's 6 yeas.
So the motion passes and the request is approved. With that, we've completed all the items on the agenda for this meeting, unless anybody has any old business or new business they'd like to bring up. Seeing none, and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Our next meeting will be March 18th, 2021. Thank you, everyone. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Cooper. I'm sorry, Ms. Smirkarova.
No problem. I just wanted to verify. The council meeting, or was it BOGO or POLO meeting that we need to attend in person or in Zoom to be confirmed for those of us that are reterming up.
Yes, so I think that is the 16th. If staff could give us a time for that, is that 9:30 on the 16th?
Chair Perry, Board Member Smirkarova, I've worked on that and I still tripped over it when I had to try for the first time. Let me double check for that. Yes, it is March 16th at 1:30, I believe.
Okay, 1:30.
Yes, 1:30, looking at my calendar. So we do have quite a few items on the general. It is actually the Business Inspections, Housing and Zoning Committee, not POGO. So it's Biz Committee. So
Biz Committee. Okay.
Yeah, there's only two committees currently operating, as I understand it. With the council, everything was condensed due to COVID. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
So you will be joined by Mr. Softly, and you would have been joined by me, but I will be traveling and unable to join you. And the expectation is that you will just have to say a few words, nothing to get stressed out about.
Good to know. Thank you.
Okay. All right, and so without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Our next meeting is March 18th. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.